Health Insurance Program. I am Abigail McIntyre, Communications Officer for the National Health Insurance Secretariat, saying thank you for listening and do join us again next time.
Grenada's economy is heading for its 7th year of consistent growth, averaging over 5%. Unemployment was reduced by 20%, while debt to GDP ratio was reduced from 108% to 63.5%. NNP committed to the economic and social development of our people. NNP delivering on the promise.
Imagine that you've worked all year and finally able to escape to Grenada for the perfect holiday. You are now relaxing on Grand Anse Beach with the wind in your hair and sand on your feet, hearing the sound of the waves crashing on the shore and birds chirp.
Miss, you want any coconut water?
No thank you.
Oh gosh, miss, buy something now. What about these pretty necklaces?
No thank you, sir.
You sure you don't want no coconut water? It's good for your daughter, you know. Miss, you have any children?
This is harassment. One bad experience could translate into the loss of new and repeat visitors. Tourism benefits everyone. Tourism is everybody's business.
You're listening to Hard Talk Grenada via www.hardtalkgrenada.com.
The strength of the iron, it's in the testing. It's not a loss, it's just a lesson. Be grateful for your blessings. You've been digging deep to find that inner strength. No, it's not the time to give up. No, nah. I'm telling you, nothing they do will never defeat where we control your destiny. I'm telling you, take your hand and point it up in the ceiling for me. So irate, wake up and I ready. Must make it ever steady. Setting goals is necessary while they idling. Precious time they wasting like a disease. It starts spreading. Now it shift their eyesight. I say, I don't know why. Some will worry about a next man's stride. Try to match up a next man's life. Fix your life. And as soon as I start walking hard, you want to vex, something must be wrong, you man. I don't come here for that. All you help me burn and dirty. I'm telling you, nothing they do will never defeat me. We control your destiny. I'm telling you, take your hand and point it up in the ceiling for me. I'm telling you, rule number one, we don't come to make nothing.
Good morning to all of our listening audience. You're listening to Hard Talk Grenada. It is a rainy, cold Wednesday morning in the beautiful Spice Isle of Grenada. A special good morning to those of you joining us on 97.5 CitysoundFM, 89.5 CRFM, 92.9 Sister Isle Radio, and that's broadcasting from Hillsborough, Carriacou, and of course 94.9, the big bad We Noise Radio coming out of Brooklyn, New York. To those of you tuning in online, those of you watching us on the live, we're happy to have you this morning. Always happy to have you. This morning we are up for some good conversation, of course. As I promised, we're going to have a guest in this morning that is going to give us some details. And it looks like he's already here. Would you look at that? Some details on the National Health Insurance, because I believe it is high time that we start that conversation, that we continue having that conversation, so we can all share our input, share our data. So the question for this morning, I'm going to pose it very, very early this morning. The question for this morning is, what are your views on the National Health Insurance? And what aspects of our healthcare system do you, not what you've heard or what you think or in your opinion, what aspects of health insurance do you believe needs most attention? So that's the question posed for this morning. Of course, our lines are open. You can call, but remember, when you call, keep your questions brief so that everybody gets a chance. I know sometimes we have a lot to say and we want to say it, but there are going to be other days when we can call and share on other topics. So let's keep our questions relevant to the topic, and let's open up the line for good conversation. Good morning, Mr. Stan Phillip. That's who we have in studio with us today. This man is versed, I must say. I've learned a lot from him as it relates to the national health insurance, what it's about, what it entails, the comparison, the contrasting, the funding, all of that. The man knows. He knows because he's done the research. And I always love speaking with him on national health insurance. So I'm asking you to call a friend, call a neighbor, share the live, turn up your radio so that everyone can be part of this conversation, because it is an important topic and it benefits each and every single Grenadian. So before we get into conversation with Stan, I know he wants to say good morning to the people.
Good morning to everyone, listeners, and thank you, Ms. Duncan, for your affluent welcome. I was looking around wondering who you're talking about, but I'm always delighted to share information.
Absolutely. So before we get into conversation, I want to read a release that was put out on November 4th by the Government Information Service, and it reads, the Government of Grenada has signed a 9-month contract with Miami-based firm Joint Independent Provider Association, or JIPA for short, to complete the process of development for implementation of the National Health Insurance Program. Grenada's Prime Minister, Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, has hailed this historic agreement with JIPA, which took effect on the 29th of October 2019, as a game changer for the healthcare system, given the many challenges faced by that system throughout our history. According to the Prime Minister, healthcare is a right, and every Grenadian citizen needs to know that their right can be satisfied right here at home. With the new contract with JIPA, Grenada is poised to become one of only a few developing nations around the world and in the Caribbean to introduce a sustainable brand of national health insurance to its citizens. All right, and we're going to stop there because it's a very long release, and hopefully I get to read the entire release for you. But I love this release simply because it points out a few very important factors, Stan. It points out that our government understands and realizes that health insurance is a right to all Grenadians. Yeah. It also points out that they understand and are aware of the challenges that our healthcare system is facing. And it further shows that they have begun the work, that they are willing to do the work, and they would like to implement something that is sustainable. And I think that is the most important word in this entire conversation, the sustainability of that national health insurance that we plan to introduce. So we're going to begin the topic, and I believe that in everything we must first define. So give us a quick rundown of what the national health insurance is all about.
Yeah, before I do that, I think we should put this release in context.
Yes.
This journey, because NHI is a journey.
It's a journey.
It began, from my recollection, way back in 1995. Mm-hmm. In fact, I served on the first National Health Insurance Advisory Committee. Then when the National Democratic Congress came into office, they continued pursuing that path. And of significance, under their watch, we had two significant events. One was a hospital study that was done, funded by USAID, and the other was a document prepared by the UE, which sought to answer the question, is Grenada ready for NHI?
Right.
And UWI produced that document. And in essence, the document said the conditions on the ground in Grenada is fertile for NHI.
Okay.
In 2013, when the government changed back to the NNP, again, a new advisory committee was set up. It was headed then by Senator Humphrey. So I was part of the 1995 advisory. I got a break in 2008,
Right.
for obvious reasons. And in 2013, I was brought back.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of familiar with the process.
Right.
And of significance then, that advisory committee comprised of a very broad cross-section of persons. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to publicly pay tribute to the late Dr. He died recently.
Thomas?
No. McBarnett.
McBarnett.
Dr. McBarnett was part of the committee that looked at the benefit package.
Okay.
And there was a gentleman from SG who also died. He was also part of that committee. But the advisory committee then prepared what is called a concept paper.
Mm-hmm.
And in the concept paper, some recommendations were made to the government. One of those being that there should be a technical study done. And I'm taking time to say this because I need people to understand the context in which that release was made.
Mm-hmm.
And coming out of this concept paper, the government applied for and received funding from an organization called, and my memory is sometimes going bad. Anyway, the funds came in, and it was administered by UNDP. Yeah, IBSA, India, Brazil, South Africa Fund. They are the ones who provide $635,000. And the purpose of this funds was to set up a NHI secretariat and to do the technical studies regarding NHI.
Right.
UWI was chosen to do that study. And they are about to complete the study, but they did quite a number of papers on the NHI issue.
Right.
So they did the technical work. So we had to transition now from the technical work to preparation for launch.
Absolutely.
And that's where JIPA came in.
Right.
And that's why at this stage, the government have signed off on contract with JIPA. What they would be doing is laying the foundation for the launch of NHI.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, at least bring in context the whole issue.
Right.
We did not jump from thinking about NHI straight to giving a contract
Yes.
to a company.
It was a process.
There was a process. And,
Right.
and all of this is documented. You see, what the government was doing was what is called hastening slowly.
Mm-hmm.
You have one opportunity to get NHI right.
Yes.
One.
Yes.
And the government wanted to make sure that it did what it was supposed to do to ensure that when this thing launches, it would not be starting today and ending tomorrow.
Of course.
And I can tell you what happened in the Bahamas. The Bahamas started a journey also on NHI.
Mm-hmm.
One government started it, another government came into office, and they shelved it.
Right.
When the government that started it came back, they took it on. But there was a rush to launch it because elections were coming. So they launched NHI in the Bahamas. And some people think that it was a rush job.
Mm-hmm.
They started with primary health care, and a number of concessions were made in the private sector, which was not very sustainable. They are now re-looking at the program. And I'm saying we can learn from our fellow Caribbean countries that have attempted NHI.
Right.
There are two other countries in the Caribbean that have launched NHI. Turks and Caicos was the earliest one. BVI then did it, then Bahamas. Grenada would be the fourth. There are big players, the MDCs as we call them, that have been talking about the NHI and have done nothing about it. So we're well on our way to ensuring that we give every Grenadian the opportunity to take care of themselves. Because, see, oftentimes we tend to believe that healthcare is for the Ministry of Health, doctors. But as individuals, we are responsible for health.
Yeah.
And if we take care of ourselves, those providers will have their role, but the interventions that they'll have to make would not be as drastic as they do.
Of course.
So I just wanted to give a background as to, where we are now and why we are where we are. So JIPA is expected to basically lay out the carpet so that we can lie down. It is intended to ensure that the program is sustainable, because we need to put on record that NHI is not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
Every country is unique, and every country's approach would be different. And you cannot lift NHI from the BVI and drop it into Grenada, because the situation on the ground is different. For example,
It's different.
in the Bahamas, because they did not have a robust primary health care program, they started with the primary health care. In Grenada, we have a fairly robust primary health care program.
Right.
So we can start with secondary care. Primary health care is already there.
Yeah.
But we can then look to secondary care, look to diagnostics. So if you compare what happened in the Bahamas to what will happen in Grenada, we would start further up the ladder than they have started.
Right, because we're already almost...
Because we already have a platform of primary health care. So, so your question really, with regards to what really is national health insurance, and I think at this point we need to clarify, because the public may have been hearing in certain quarters that the government was advised to do universal health care, and we are not following that instruction. We are going to national health insurance. And, I was driving here to get here this morning. I was trying to look for an analogy that would kind of help to explain.
Right.
There are USVI islands, right? And there's the USA. If you're in a USVI island, you practically have almost everything that they have on the mainland, but you're not on the mainland.
Right.
Right? You still use the US dollar, but you're not on the mainland. And I'm looking at it from that angle. Universal health care is the ultimate. That's what you want to be able to ensure that every resident, every citizen have access to unfettered health care. Right? The state would be responsible for ensuring that everything that this resident of the Grenadian needs, he's going to get it.
Right.
That's the ultimate. Universal health care, national health insurance is recognizing that because of limited resources, countries cannot just give unfettered care.
Of course.
The state does not have a deep enough pocket to ensure that they pay for everything. So national health insurance is a roll-up program where residents are invited to contribute towards providing this care. Right? So that's basically the difference between both.
Well, I on hearing about the universal healthcare, because it has been talked about a lot on different forums, and I myself was not too au fait with what it was, so I did a bit of research, and what I did find is that universal healthcare is the broad concept, basically, and it has to be implemented in different ways, right? It's different steps, right? And of course, the common denominator, right, for that program, in some form, is some form of government action, right? And it's extended across the healthcare system. But what is most important about my research is that in most countries that have implemented universal health care, it was done so through legislation, but also through taxation, right? Because what they found is that in order for it to be sustainable, they must be funded. And I mean, you can't get a grant, you can't get a loan, you can't get anything like that to fund health care, right? Because these things are not continuous. They can end at any time. But healthcare must remain continuous. Right. So they had looked at many different ways in which this can be. And what they all came down to is the fact that there must be some contribution from the state, from the people of the state, that is, in order to sustain.
Right.
And that's on the universal level.
Yeah.
You know, so let's just take into concept the national health insurance, which is just a step away from the universal health care. Right? And we have to understand, because in the conversations we've had before, the first thing that we need to do as a people is to understand that, yes, we have a healthcare system with a problem that needs fixing. Yes, we want better healthcare because it is our right. But the biggest understanding must come from the fact that it has to be paid for. It cannot be free. If we cannot understand that it must come at a cost, then we are not going to go anywhere. Because we are going to continue fighting over the fact that we want this and that and the other out of healthcare, but we don't want to pay for it.
All right. You know, we can look at two countries that's close to us. When I say close, I mean Grenadians have relatives in both the UK and in Canada, and they don't call what they provide universal health because it has not yet gotten to that. In the UK, it's called the National Health Insurance System, right? In Canada, it's also a health system, but they have not called it universal. No, the thing is, you will find in some circles that the two would be spoken of interchangeably, right? As if they're the same, but they're not. They're not the same. You know, one is the ultimate. That's everybody's striving to.
Yes.
So national health insurance is a step towards. That's a pathway towards universal health.
Yeah.
You're using this to get where you want to get,
Yeah.
because you're recognizing that with your limited resources, the state cannot provide all that is needed to ensure that people have health care. So there's this contribution, this social program where you make a contribution, I make a contribution. You probably might never go to the doctor, but I may go 6-7 times.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of the program is a social one where you want to ensure that all your citizens have unfettered access to health care.
Right.
They should not be disadvantaged because they don't have the monies in their pockets, right? So there's no discrimination.
Right.
It is, the playing field is open, and everybody would have access to health care.
Absolutely. And that also comes with the understanding that there are people in Grenada who really, really are in need of healthcare and cannot afford it. Even the primary healthcare that we offer, they still cannot afford the little cost that is sometimes incurred.
Right.
You know, and we have to understand that. So national health insurance, as you're saying, is geared to cushion that effect, to ensure that everyone can contribute in some way or the other. But the overall goal is so that everybody in every strata in Grenada can access healthcare.
Yeah, I was listening to a program a couple of days ago, and this person called and said that they went to the health center. They saw a doctor in the public sector, and they were given a prescription. They went to the dispensary, and they were supposed to get 4 bits of medication, and the pharmacist told them, "You go and buy this one, and then come back, and I'll give you the other 3." And the person called and complained. I mean, I don't have the money. Where would I get the monies to buy? If you give me, why don't you give me what you have in the pharmacy?
Yeah.
And I had to call it and say that certain types of medication have to be taken together. And if the pharmacist knows that you need this medication in order to take the others, they will not give you the others, right? But I'm saying this to say, even if we have a formulary of medication that the government provides free, the government cannot provide at this stage all the medication that's been prescribed. So those that are available are the ones that people either have to pay $2, $3 or get free, because I mean, it's heavily subsidized. But you know, I was thinking, after hearing the caller, I was saying, look, there it is, this person went to a public facility. They got free attention from the medical provider.
Right.
But to get their medication, they have to make a contribution.
Yeah.
And the person was complaining not because they want to complain, because they were saying, well, if you don't have it, give it to me. When I get money, I'll buy the others. And I was trying to say to them, look, it doesn't work like that.
Mm-hmm.
But with national health insurance, now what the person said, let me back up and say, that they could have gotten the medication in a pharmacy, a private pharmacy, but they don't have the money.
Right.
With national health insurance, that would not happen.
Right.
You have a choice of collecting your medication from the government pharmacy or from a private pharmacy, because hopefully they'll sign on to NHI and they'll be part of the network.
Right.
So people have access. So I said that because you mentioned even in primary care, there are people who have challenges.
Yeah.
There are people who go to see a doctor, whether it's a private doctor or public doctor, public in the sense that he operates from a health center.
Right.
And in order for the doctor to properly diagnose the person's ailment or illness, they need to do a CT scan,
Yeah.
or MRI, right? Or, ultrasound.
Yeah.
If it's not available in the public sector, that person have to go in the private sector. No, until and unless that person comes back to the doctor with the results of that test, the doctor cannot take it any further. But what if the person don't have the $1,200? What if they don't have the $2,000 for the diagnostic test? And that's where NHI steps in to say, look, whether you have the monies or not, that should not debar you from getting quality health care.
Very true.
So it's in the context, people have to look at this thing in the context that it is providing basic rights, basic care to people. That's what you intend. Now, somebody wants to do what you call it, corrective surgery. Maybe I want to make my nose look straighter than it is, this sort of stuff. I mean, you pay for that out of your pocket.
Yeah.
But the things that you need to live a comfortable life would be provided on the NHI.
Of course.
Of
course.
And listeners should understand that because it's a journey. If you're going from St. George's to Grenville, you'll pass through. If you're going on the western side, places you have to pass before you get there. You can just jump into Grenville. And even when NHI is introduced, it would not be a case where you get everything. You have to gradually include services. So the basic service that's needed would be there, right? So, we've been having a discussion on the benefit package, and there's a proposed basket of services.
Right.
And one of the questions that always comes up is, would that basket include dialysis?
Yeah.
And it is a serious question. I mean, you get to the stage of dialysis because, unfortunately, certain things that were supposed to be done was not done. So now you have this problem.
Right.
It has to be corrected. But are there any steps we can take not to get to the dialysis stage? NHI is saying prevention is going to be key. It's going to be key because, you see, right now, you may be feeling okay. So you're not going to do an annual checkup.
Yeah.
Women would probably have to do the mammogram or whatever. And some of them will do it when they sit next to somebody and somebody said, I did mine. Oh, I haven't done mine. But I don't have the money to do it. What NHI is going to say, you're part of this program. It's mandatory that you have, let's say, 2 full annual checkups. It's not going to cost you anything. Because if it's going to cost you $150 or $200 or $250 to do your full checkup, right? It's better to spend that money up front than to wait until you develop a condition that's going to cost $3,000 and $4,000. So preventative care would be key, right? So we have to look at it from a position where you may find it not proper if you're on an NHI and you get a phone call, Ms. Duncan, I'm calling from the National Health Insurance office. Your checkup is due
Right.
X date. Calling to remind you. Right? You may find, why are you bothering me about this? But if you do that checkup and something is flagged, then we may not have to send you to Cuba or to Colombia to do our operation because we'd have nipped whatever you're developing in the bud. So we're not talking about just NHI being there to treat people when they're sick.
Yeah.
We're talking about a change in the way people live.
Yeah.
Lifestyle changes would have to be introduced.
And
People,
the way they look at healthcare
exactly,
as well.
you know, because I mean, right now, people, if you don't feel okay, if you don't feel bad, you don't go to a doctor.
Yeah.
People go to see a physician when they're not feeling well, and even when they do, say, by tomorrow that will be gone, man. I won't bother.
We
If it
go
comes
when
back
things
tomorrow,
real tough.
exactly. So NHI would insist that you do this preventative care.
Right.
You know, so we have to look at it. It is intended to ensure that the quality of people's lives are improved.
And I like that you said that, because recently it's being said that we shouldn't be focusing on NHI, we should be focusing on universal health care and ensuring that people live better lives and preventative health care and all of that. And it's good to know that the National Health Insurance also covers preventative health care and ensuring keeping tabs on people, because me myself, if I have to go and do a checkup every year, sometimes you don't remember, your life gets busy, sometimes you find the money that you have, you want to squeeze it to make it last until, so you're not going to spend it there, or you're not going to spend it here because you ain't feeling sick, you think it's okay, you could wait another year, or you could wait another month. And I think it's important. Recently a study was done and it showed, of Grenada actually, and it showed that a lot of young women are in late stage cervical cancer, cervical cancer in the late stages, and that's simply because nobody really ever bothers to check, you know. And if you get a plan or a program that actually reminds you, calls you and says, hey, you know, it's time, then why not?
You know, I'm from an insurance background. That's what I studied. And I can remember the early private health insurance policies never covered preventative care.
Right.
It only responded to claims.
Right.
And then it was felt, look, but we are spending so much money for operations. Why don't we put aside some money to send our clients to get medically checked?
Right.
So they have now shifted to include the same thing we're talking about, your annual checkups, whatever. You do it, and the doctor or the facility you do it at is paid. There's not even a deductible.
Right.
If you make a claim, then you have to pay part of it. But for your checkups, it's you go and you bring the bill and they cover everything. So it's accepted that preventative care. In fact, our parents says an ounce of prevention is better than a whole pound of cure. You'll be too young to know about that. Hasn't probably no need there. But I mean, if you can prevent something from happening, it's going to cost you less.
Of course.
You know?
Of
and
course.
For the persons who are promoting, unfortunately, giving the public the impression that the government is going against norms. Instead of doing universal health care, they do national health insurance. I mean, this whoever that person or persons are, they are just playing in people's minds because they know that it's semantics.
Yeah.
A country decides to go a particular route, like I say, it's a path to NHI, is a path to national health insurance. And that's what people should understand.
And of course, not to cut you, but of course it's also on a needs basis and what the people can handle at the time. You know, because remember, if we're talking about universal health care, we're talking about it on a larger scale. Now, if we're having a problem paying for primary health care, we're having a problem even with the conversation of paying for national health insurance, then how do we now want to skip to universal health care, which of course will come at more of a cost?
You see, I sat in a forum with a particular individual who will remain nameless, who always promoted universal health. And their position was that we are already providing quite a number of things. So let's just say we offer universal health care. And I remember saying, look, people need to feel the difference.
Yeah.
Right? Because the services that are on the ground right now, yes, it's felt, but people need to see or feel a difference. In the Bahamas, what they did, in order to ensure that people feel the impact of NHI, the SSB, it's not NSA, Social Security Board built a brand new hospital and outfitted it. That was the forerunner to NHI. So when they launched NHI, the hospital was there.
Right.
The Turks and Caicos did the same thing. But what was recognized is that people need to identify with the program.
Yeah.
The difference between these territories and our country is that they're close to the mighty US of A.
Right.
And in fact, I heard stories that people would go over to the US, make the baby, come back to Turks or to BVI. So quite a number of those persons have dual citizenship.
Right.
And when they get sick, they decide whether they want to remain or to go.
Or jump,
so they got kind of used to the U.S. model of medicine. And I don't have to say to you that the United States is the only developed country that's not practicing any form of either universal health or national health insurance. You hear the Obamacare debates,
Right.
all of this thing. And it's because it's a big money. Healthcare is big money.
Of course.
Right? And the big players want to control or maintain their hold over the healthcare.
Of course, because in a lot of the research that I've done, and I mean, I have friends all over the world, and in conversations with them, you would hear stories about their healthcare system, and you would wonder, well, the most things we just probably experience here is a little too long wait, or can't get an ambulance, or these kinds of things. And I mean, not saying that those things are not trivial for our country, but at the same time, sometimes we make it seem as our country has the worst healthcare in the world. But when you hear stories of all over the world and the problems that even in America, where the majority of the healthcare system is privatized, and in that way they have more access to machinery and medicine and all of the outfitting that a hospital needs for it to be great. They have that because it's privatized. They have the big guys with the big dollars pumping money into the healthcare system. But apart from it being privatized, they have to spend, the citizens have to spend quite a number of dollars when they go into those hospitals on healthcare, on health insurance. Some of them cannot even get services if they don't have health insurance. So these are the things that we need to consider. So when we speak about national health insurance for our little island, that is a big jump for us. Because it means now that we are moving forward. We are making advancements to ensure that our healthcare service is top of the line. But apart from the implementation of the healthcare service and the basket of services, which we are going to speak about shortly, we also need to identify that the problem with our healthcare service is not just cosmetic. It's not just not having medication or not having the proper machinery or not being able to be efficient. That's not the only problem we have. We have a big problem with customer service. A really big problem with customer service. And I mean, yes, we know sometimes that it is said that nurses are working in terrible conditions and that they're stressed or they're overworked. But I look at it this way. In the job of a teacher, right? When you take a job and you accept a job as a teacher, you have to know that there must be some difficulty that comes with it. And that goes for any job, really. There must be some level of difficulty, and how you manage that difficulty must not affect your students, and in turn must not affect your customers, right? So when we hear a lot about the nurses, they are overworked and they are underpaid, and that's why they behave the way that they do, I don't agree with that. because I simply believe that customer service must trump everything. So if I'm frustrated, it does not mean that I must provide poor customer service. And then there is the management issue. Who holds who accountable for what? Who manages the day-to-day running of the hospital to ensure that everything is going the way that it is supposed to go? And so you see, there are a lot of other questions, a lot of other aspects of the healthcare service that needs to be attended to.
You see, I mentioned two countries, BVI and Turks.
Mm-hmm.
I also mentioned Bahamas. These are three countries that have implemented NHI.
Right.
The Bahamas is driven by private sector health providers.
Right.
They began with primary health care. Turks and Caicos and BVI, they had a similar problem with regard to the performance of their health providers in the public sector. Both of them contracted out their hospitals.
Right.
So it is run by, one is run, I think they're both Canadian firms that manages. Now the government gave them a mandate. We give you this facility, you run it, you need to bring it up to a certain standard.
Right.
You need to manage the workers and ensure that people have proper service.
Right.
People were given a choice in BVI, I could tell you that. Those persons who were public servants were given a choice, right? You can stay with the public service, right? We can find work for you. Or you can go work for this new company that's managing a hospital. Some decide to stay and some decide to go. But what was noticeable is that the same nurse or doctor that provided a service at a certain level suddenly spiked. The service just changed. They were more professional, they were more understanding because their paymaster was different.
Yeah.
They no longer worked with government. They now work with a private company who is holding them responsible for what they do, right? And I mean, I'm one of those persons who keeps saying, and I'm from a biblical standpoint, there's no way you can put new wine in an old wine cask and expect it to taste good. So, I mean, we talking national health insurance. We're talking about what the government should do and what the government should provide. But providers are key.
Yes.
Providers of the service are key.
Yes.
So whether it's a doctor, a nurse, or a lab technician, a nurse aide, whoever it is, it cannot be business as usual.
Yeah.
You cannot stoop for a patient because the patient, says something to you. I'm not saying that patients disrespect anybody, but sometimes the response you get with dealing with these providers makes you wonder. But
Yeah.
you know why that happens? I mean, we're working for government.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people have this notion that because I'm working for the state, I can do, and that's not only in the health sector. It's also in the other services. Somebody is going to be working for government for 10 years, and they go to a private sector job,
And they change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is important for people to understand that the attitude of our healthcare providers also needs to change. So the conversation about providing diagnostic equipment, providing facilities. I heard recently a call for a new hospital. Whatever you talk about, let's talk about how do our providers, provide a service. How do they interact with the public?
Yeah.
Are they looking for the dollar? Because, I spoke to a friend of mine over the weekend and they said to me, remember this nurse? She went away. She took the package. That's what they said. She took the package and she went away. Now, these are persons who probably got a job in the UK or wherever, and they left. They're free to go, right? And the question as to whether they're going because the condition is bad or they're going because they're going to get more money, the jury's out on that. Because I can guarantee you that if you do a survey as to why we lost so many nurses, the majority of them would not say it's because the conditions are bad.
Of course not.
The reason most of them are leaving is because the pay is good.
The pay,
right?
mhm.
So, I mean, but again, people are free to move from one place to the other. People are free to pursue their career wherever they want to.
But just recently, Stan, I was saying, and I heard that same claim of, nurses leaving the hospital because the conditions are bad and nurses are migrating to the bigger countries to practice over there because the money over there is better. And I said, well, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it as a good thing. And you know why I see it as a good thing? Because the same persons that are complaining that, nurses are migrating, we need to keep our nurses and so on, are the same people that are complaining that our children are coming out of school and there are no jobs. When a nurse leaves, what happens? A door opens. So one of the young people that we have in SGU that's studying nursing, they have a job. Mm-hmm. And why would we not want to promote betterment for our people? If you see that there's a job opening in the UK for one of our nurses and they can go and you know that there's somebody to fill their spot, then why not? Why is that such a bad thing?
Yeah, you see, there would always be this discussion as to whether or not we can pay to keep nurses. And I don't think we can pay to keep a nurse. Because there's no way we can match the salary of any of the developed countries, whether it's in Dubai or the United States
of course
or UK.
Not.
We cannot match the salary.
No.
And if that person wants to go, once they're not bonded, they're free to go.
They're free to go.
So, I mean, people would take task with government's move to fill the position, the nurses' position. Because, okay, if we have a shortage of nurses, we have nurses in the pipeline being trained. But in the meantime, we need nurses. You're saying that the ratio of nurses to patients is low. Then wherever we get the nurses from, you should not be complaining.
Yeah.
But I can bet you, I don't bet, but I can bet you that not too long from now, the same people who complaining about there's a shortage of nurses would be complaining that we're bringing nurses from X place or Y place or Z place. The same group. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's difficult to please everyone. I think our the aim of the government basically should be to ensure that people have quality health care.
Of course.
And they should do what it takes to ensure that people have quality health care.
Of course.
I mean, we'll always have these issues about the doctors going. In fact, I have a serious problem with doctors who are supposed to be here and they're not here. I mean, they're bonded. After 7 years practicing as a doctor, studying for a doctor, your bond should be at least equal to the number of years that you study.
Right.
I mean, I went to study for 3 years. And my bond was 5 years, right? So we train a lot of doctors, and we have to ensure that we keep them in the system. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, there has to be improvement in terms of the facilities, but that doesn't absolve you from serving. And I say the same thing about teaching. When I used to be going to school, we had teachers. I mean, I'm talking about the definition of a teacher. Now we have persons who are working as a teacher for a salary. They don't have the commitment. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. The kind of commitment that teachers should have. It should be about, the people you serve.
Of course.
I was telling my son the other day, I said, look, if you're doing a job and you like the job you do, maybe the pay may not be what you're looking for, but job satisfaction trumps salaries. Because you may go somewhere to get an extra $1,000 and you're miserable.
Of course. I'll tell you this. I taught for a little under 6 years. And the circumstances of where I taught was not the greatest. Mm-hmm. But it didn't matter to me. You know why? Because I understood why I was doing what I was doing. Mm-hmm. The love for the children, the love for what you do. Mm-hmm. Just the thought and knowing that you are an integral player in the development of that child's life. Mm-hmm. That alone is satisfaction. I mean, yes, money is important. Money is a topic that nobody ever wants to get into because once you start to talk about money, emotions start to flare. Exactly. But then at the same time, it's a different feeling. It's a more satisfying feeling to know that you have made a difference. I have students, I'm not currently an active teacher, but I have children that still come and spend weekends with me and call me Miss in tongue. I have children, old, big, grown, working children that still call me Miss in tongue, you know, and it's just the satisfaction. And it should be the same thing with any job, especially in healthcare. Knowing that somebody is coming to you and they are not in the best of health, they don't feel, and all they're looking for is sometimes it's just a little smile, you know. A little smile, a little, oh my, how is your day going? A little small conversation just to make them feel a little better. Because in Grenada especially, where most of our healthcare service is free, and we have people from all over Grenada, all different stratas and walks of Grenada coming to you for healthcare, we need to understand that we don't know their background. We don't know what that person has been through for the day, whether they've eaten, whether they've slept, whether they had anything to sleep on for the night. We don't know. And then on top of that, they ain't feeling well. That alone, you know, and it's not to say that nurses don't go through what they go through, and we understand that. But it comes with the territory. You know, it comes with the territory. It's like a teacher saying, me, I can't take on no children today because I ain't feeling well. You know, it's the same thing. It comes with the territory. And I think we have to start understanding that and start being able to provide a higher level of customer service. So even if the hospital run down and horrible, and at least when you go there, you spend 10 hours and it feel like 2, because the customer service. You could imagine going to the hospital and spending 3 hours in the hospital and bad customer service right through. You feel like you come out there and you spend the whole day and you go home feeling worse than you went because there was no support. There wasn't that shoulder to rest your head on, that kind of feeling, you know. So there's so many things that we need to look at when it comes to national health insurance. And I want to believe, and you can clarify for me, that national health insurance seeks to guide or to manage some of these things.
Exactly. I mean, and it would be probably instructive to help people to understand what they can expect in a national health insurance. Because the term has been bantered about, and people probably don't really understand what different can we expect. We already go into the clinic and we get in what we get in, whatever. Maybe some medications that we're not getting, we're going to get it. But the intention is to provide all the services to begin with, because NHI has to be done on an incremental basis. Right? You cannot get everything at the same time. And the aim is to ensure that everything that's available on island right now is going to be part of the program. So, diagnostics, for example, as I mentioned, it's available. We have a state-of-the-art center on the Carriacou. But people go to the MPs for $1,000 or $2,000 to do a CT scan or MRI.
Right.
Now, under NHI, the intention is to ensure that everything that's available on island would be available. So that's a good starting point. So we're looking at things like primary care visits, inpatient medical and surgical care, specialist visits. Again, the government don't have specialists in every area. So we have to wait for certain specialists and make appointments for when they're getting in. Under NHI, that specialist visit would be available.
All right, let's pause for a moment because we have a call on the line and we don't want to lose that caller. Good morning, caller.
Hi, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Listen, I want to agree with you and your guest that health insurance is important, and I don't think that anyone would dispute that. And I am in support of the national health insurance, although there are a few things that may need rectifying and clarification. However, I've listened to the program, and I keep hearing as though you're bashing the nurses and healthcare workers, and maybe you're not intentionally doing so. But from nurse perspective and healthcare workers' perspective in Grenada, they make a lot of sacrifice. and have paid the least amount in the Caribbean region. Yes? And having little or sometimes nothing to work with in terms of, in some cases, no medication to work with, in some cases, no equipment to work with. They make a lot of sacrifices. And I think that we must appreciate the efforts of our healthcare workers. What is needed more than ever, apart from the health insurance or what you're talking about, NHI and so forth, what we need is a new hospital. Not a new wing, but a new hospital and new management. Get square pegs with the round holes to assist in running a proper healthcare system. I agree. Healthcare is very expensive. And every part of the world you go, healthcare is a problem. I'm not concerned about the other parts of the world. I am concerned about Grenada. 100,000 people with trained people and so forth. Let us focus on our island and how we can take our healthcare system forward. For too long, we have been seeing problems with the healthcare, and we keep talking about it, lip service, and nothing has been done about it. So I don't think the NHS by itself will solve the problem. I think it has to be a collaborative effort by recognizing the sacrifice that our healthcare workers are giving, by ensuring that we have a new healthcare facility, state-of-the-art healthcare facility, in collaboration to all the things that you're talking about. But let us not be beating up on our healthcare workers. They make a lot of sacrifices. And
all right.
we must find the root cause why a lot of them are leaving. There's a problem. Let us find out what is causing them to leave the system even greater, to go to green pastures as they are clean. Something is definitely wrong, and it must be addressed.
All right, caller, thank you so much for your contribution. But let me clarify. I think I know who the caller is, so I'm not expecting him to say anything less. But let me clarify. Nobody is bashing the nurses. We're making general statements here, and it's something that is obvious to all Grenadians, right? We have nurses, and we know that's common knowledge, that are excellent at what they do. I have had experience in the hospital. I've spent months at time in the hospital, and I've had nurses that are excellent. But we cannot pretend that there aren't issues with as it relates to customer service when we go to our hospitals. We cannot pretend. So nobody is bashing the nurses. So we're not going to try to change the line of conversation and make it into something political and make it into, because that's what this call was all about, to make this into something political and seem as if we were trying to be negative about the healthcare system. That's not what we're doing here. What we are doing is pointing out, because we have sat here and we have pointed out, in all honesty, the problems that we see with the healthcare service. Right? And we are simply saying that the NHI seeks to fix all of these issues, to help with all of these issues. Right? So we're not going to politicize it. And as I said yesterday, you could put a dress on a pig. It will still be a pig. We can put a new hospital down in any part of Grenada. If the system is still broken, you put that same system into that new hospital, and it will still be broken. And that's all that we're saying. So there are so many aspects of the healthcare service that needs to be fixed, and that is what we need to focus on. And that is what the National Health Insurance Stand, I believe, is geared and ready to do.
Now, let me just help the caller to understand that if a research is done, in every country where NHI was instituted, there was a dramatic change in the attitude of healthcare workers and the facilities, healthcare facilities. So NHI is not just intended to provide health care. NHI is also intended to drive the process whereby facilities, like the new hospital you're talking about. You see, I mean, sometimes we have the argument, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And we can have that discussion back and forth.
Right.
I hope the caller is not suggesting that we put a pause on NHI and build a hospital first. I hope that's not what he's suggesting, because I mean, the time it would take to build a hospital, the persons who go in around with a motorcade to get their child to the United States or to wherever to get an operation, we have a lot of motorcades going on, and we'll have people complaining that we have a problem with healthcare. So NHI is intended to fix the system. I'm not going to be engaging in a discussion whether or not we should build a new hospital or not. The question is, are there things we can do? Are there interventions that we can engage in right now to better the system?
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody is disputing that we need to have proper facilities. NHI would ensure that there are facilities. In fact, we may not find that the government may not even have to find monies to build a hospital. Mm-hmm. When NHI is on stream, investors might say, look, this thing is good. I mean, if I do this, I'm going to get paid. Yeah. And we may just find that some investor may decide to put a hospital down. Yeah. So I'm not arguing, I'm not disputing that there's need for improvement in a plant, but I don't think that we should be putting a pause on NHI. And if I came across as bashing the nurses, I mean, I want to apologize because
of course.
I don't intend to bash the nurses or healthcare providers. I'm just speaking facts. That the attitude of healthcare providers, some healthcare providers, are wanting. And these are realities. Yeah. And as to why a nurse or doctor leaves, that's personal. One may leave because he wants more money. Another may leave because they want to be exposed, in a broader field. Yeah. But that's, as I said earlier on, nobody is going to stop anybody from going.
You can't.
Once you don't have a bond and you want to move on, you can move on.
Absolutely.
What I don't hope is that when we fill those gaps, and I said that a while ago, when those gaps are filled, people don't start complaining that you have brought people from X country or Y country to serve. Because if all locals are moving out, you don't want the population to suffer because Nurse A decides to go to the UK. So should I sit and scream and say, oh, that nurse should have never left, and she left because the conditions were bad, so let's not fill her spot. So I mean, the whole question of whether somebody should remain or leave is personal. I say to people, I studied the field that I'm in, or the profession I have. I didn't have to stay in Grenada. I chose to stay in Grenada.
Exactly.
But, I mean, that's my choice. I cannot tell anybody who is qualified whether to remain or to leave. It's up to you as an individual.
Yeah.
But what we're saying is that if that individual decides to leave, we should not allow the system to suffer because of that individual. So I mean, if I came across, and I'm saying it again as bashing,
of course,
I want to apologize. Because it's not intended to bash, it's just to face stark reality. If you do the research, you will see
of course,
that there are issues. In fact, a study was done recently by, I think it was WHO. One of the organizations did a study for human resource issues in health in the Caribbean, not only Grenada. It was a Caribbean study, and we have migration of nurses. I mean, this thing didn't just start, in the 70s, and I'm not a young person. In the 70s, we had a number of Grenadians. My sister is in the UK. She went away to study. They were paying them at that time. People were invited to go to the UK to study nursing, and they remained as nurses. So it's not something that just started. No, the difference is that they are waiting until you are trained. So the monies are spent to train you.
Yes,
and then they invite you to come along. And it says something about the quality of training that the nurses are getting here.
Absolutely.
We should be glad to know that a Grenadian nurse that was trained not in SGU, because those people who are going are not bachelor nurses.
No.
Those persons who were trained through the system. And they are accepted in another country as an RN.
Of course.
And we should be proud of that. But
we should.
Caller, I mean, I hope you're listening still. I mean, it was not my intention to bash. If I sung it that way, I apologize. But I'm saying, let us not play the chicken and egg game where we need the hospital first before we fix the system. We can fix the system. In the meantime, we pursue the hospital.
Absolutely. We have another call on the line. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Guest as well. I just wanted to add to the discussion, the movement of nurses out of Grenada.
Mm-hmm.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you. You're live.
But one of the things I just want to draw to your attention is the fact that nurses have always migrated from Grenada, But the difference is that we had a training school.
Right.
So we never really noticed the difference in that every year you had a batch of nurses and midwives graduating.
Yeah.
So there was a constant supply of nurses. The problem is the fact that we are not training our local nurses. We are not training our midwives. We don't have any midwives in training. The only local school has been closed. So therefore we have that shortage. Okay?
All right.
And so how are we going to replace the nurses who are going? Many of them are midwives. And they're not necessarily going to England. They're going to other Caribbean islands. So we need to look at getting our nursing school reestablished for the training of our local nurses and our midwives, because we do not have midwives. We are not training any midwives at the moment. St. George's University don't train them. So the few midwives we have, when you talk about primary health care, you need your midwives out in the community.
Right.
Where are we going to get them from? So we need to look at re-establishing our local nursing and midwifery school to train our nurses and midwives so we can have a constant supply. And when those migrate, we don't have a problem. We've never had that problem. Nurses have always migrated. Every year you had graduation. So there wasn't a problem. So we need to consider that. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, caller, for that contribution.
Yeah, caller, I happened to be in a forum a couple of days ago where I heard the Minister of Health speak on the issues regarding training of midwives. I think one of the issues was accreditation for the nurses at SGU, which is almost complete. So what I heard then, and I'm sure I can share it, is that there would be a program to train midwives. The challenge is that in order to be a midwife, you have to be a practicing nurse. You have to be a practicing nurse. So the challenge is now pulling those nurses who are in the system out from the system to train them as midwives. Yeah. And that's a challenge I think the Ministry of Health is having. And they're working to solve that problem. But there is a plan to train midwives because there has been a gap between the last set that's trained and those nurses now. Because there's some people who want to do midwifery. Mm-hmm. And there was no, since the school was closed, there was no training. But I understand, and I'm sharing, that there is a system in place now to ensure that the midwives are trained. And nurses have been trained at the SGU. I mean, in the past, we had our own nursing school. Again, there's a lot of debate as to whether or not we should have closed that down or not. The jury is still out on that one also. I have my own personal opinion on that, which I would not share. But there is need for us to have a constant supply of nurses because the government would have no option right now but to import nurses. I mean, and I'm saying it here because that's what's going to happen. We don't have them locally. We need them in the system. They have to be brought in.
But Stan, do you believe, because I am all for the migration of nurses. I believe that if an individual, because I don't understand when did we start? When did we get to the point of attacking persons, individuals, for their personal decisions on where they choose to work? I think that is low because we want betterment for our people. If they can get it here, then that's amazing. If they can get it elsewhere, we are still happy for them because they are still our people. And these are the same people that turn around and contribute back to Grenada and back to its development. So we like that. We like when our people can improve and can migrate and can move. But like you said, the problem that we are left with is the gap. So do you think that encouraging more of our young people because I don't think most people do market research in terms of when I send my child to study or when I am going to study, when I choose my career or what I want my career to be, is it because I like that field? Is it because there is a need for that field? Am I studying in that field to remain in Grenada? Is there space for a field like that in Grenada? And these kinds of questions, are they being asked when students go to school? Mm-hmm. Because if that is the case, and we know that the healthcare system is lacking, then we can find young people who are willing to be trained as nurses to fill those gaps, to move on to these stages so that our people feel freer to migrate, and to move around in different circles. If I want to take my family and move to the UK, I should not not go because of a fear that there's nobody to fill my spot. You know, that is a personal decision that I must make for me and my family. So we must come out of the business of saying that too many of the nurses are migrating, because that is not a problem. What we need to do is find a solution for filling the gap. The problem is the gap that is left. So how do we fill that gap? That is what we need to find a solution for, and stop making a problem out of the fact that the nurses are migrating, because it's not.
I heard the Minister of Health also speak to strategy going forward. And I also can say, because like I said, he said it in a forum, that the move now is to train nurse aides, right?
Right.
In the interim, while we look for qualified nurses, we train nurse aides. By the time they're through, they can then move on
to become
nurses. And those imported nurses, because I'm saying it, I mean, we Grenadians have to expect that we would have to bring people into the nursing, because we don't have, and nobody will complain about taking jobs, because if there are no trained nurses available on island, and we need nurses in the system, we have to bring them in. But between the time that they are working on the ground and our trainees reach the stage, we can replace them. Right. You know, there's nothing wrong. I mean, I'm not going to advocate. I'm not going to tell nurses go. If you love what you do and you want to serve your country, you can stay.
Yeah.
But those who make the decision to go, we cannot fault them for the decision.
No, we cannot.
You see, what is bad is when we make it seem as though the only reason why nurses are leaving the system is because things are bad. That's unfortunate when people give the impression that we have a shortage of nurses here because things are bad, so nurses are going. I mean, if on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm saying 80% to 90% of the nurses who are leaving because their remuneration is better where they're going.
Yeah,
that's the reason. I mean, they're going to societies, those that's going to Dubai or UAE. I mean, they don't know what they're going to, all right? I mean, moving into another man's country to work is one thing. You get a big salary, but job satisfaction, the way you're treated over there. So, I mean, we wish them the best, but at the same time, let us not politicize this, because that's what generally happens.
Yeah.
You know, Grenada is one of the few countries in the world that every
political.
living thing is political.
Which is sad, huh?
You know, healthcare is a serious matter.
It is.
Right? And I say to people who try to trivialize what we're trying to do with NHI, suggesting that we put this on hold. There are people who are saying that, look, I can afford to buy my own insurance, so I don't need this. I have news for those persons who thinking that, after 60, 65, that insurance will be taken away from you. When you need it most, that's when it's gone. And that's the reality of private health insurance. You know, so NHI basically takes care of you from conception, from the time you're conceived. Your parents or your mother accessing and using NHI.
Yeah.
And until you depart, once you're available to be treated by a provider, you'll be treated. And I think we need to see the social nature of the program. Stop looking at what we can afford. The people who oppose NHI, and I was in a forum, not a forum, I was in a meeting last Tuesday, and somebody walked into this PS's office, and they were talking about the child that died. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, it was a sudden thing. Within a week, the child was dead. And the person who was there, who's also a PS, said to me, Stan, we really need NHI. Nobody knew this child had this condition.
Yeah.
Right? By the time it was discovered, child expired.
Yeah.
Now, and that's why I'm saying NHI is going to make big noises about prevention.
Yeah.
And if it's one thing we should welcome is that notion that I don't have to scratch my head about finding $200-300 to do a total medical checkup. It is something that I can do.
Yeah.
I will have to do. And if I don't do it, I'll be called and told, you need to get it done. You know, so it's about ensuring that people be healthy, and remain healthy. That's what it's all about, you know. I mean, I fail to understand why, you know, we kind of want to sideline. Now, if you notice, nobody directly attacks the NHI concept.
Yeah.
Because they'll be attacking the regular man on the street.
Yeah.
What we try to do is find things are wrong, what is happening.
Yes.
To say that, look, that's not what we should be focusing on. But that's what we should be focusing on. And the research would show that the countries that have made healthcare available to their residents are more productive. Right? You don't have to scratch your head about if you fall sick, what's going to happen to you. You know, you wake up this morning and you have a headache that lasted throughout the night. You can walk into either a public facility, health center, or private doctor's office once they're part of the network and get attended. Right. It would also ensure that the service provided by providers are upgraded.
Right.
I mean, you walk into a private doctor's office and all he has, apart from his stethoscope around his neck, is probably a pressure machine.
Yeah.
And I'm walking there and telling him what's happening to me. He takes my pressure, listens to my heartbeat, and writes a prescription. Right? Now, the question is, would that be accepted as primary health care? What if I need to have other interventions?
Right.
Even the whole issue of checking people's blood pressure, we still use these archaic things, and there are machines that gives you a much clearer revelation as to the person's health condition. I'm not a medical person, but I've been around medical persons and medical equipment long enough to know that there's simple things that you can have in your office. So what is going to happen is that persons or offices, and we're talking all wrong right now, persons who would be part of the network would be expected to upgrade their office. So if you want to be part of the NHI system, right, we have a minimum standard. These are the things that you need to have in your office. And the people would know, look, these are the persons who are approved providers. So if you're not up to scratch, you're not going to be on the list. Because it is unfair for one person to go to Dr. A, and Dr. A has all that's needed to ensure that you track the person's condition, and Dr. B doesn't have it. The provider's cost is the same.
Yeah.
So the NHI would ensure that the level of service provided by providers are up to a certain standard. I mean, so it's a win-win all over the place. I mean, we would see the difference. I mean, we would definitely see the difference when NHI is instituted. The naysayers and the skeptics would be pleasantly surprised that this is going to drive the quality of care up, and it's going to attract investments.
Yeah.
I went to Colombia twice on healthcare missions, and you go to these healthcare facilities, state-of-the-art healthcare services and facilities. You know why? Because when a patient walks in, the owners or the operators of this facility is guaranteed payment. He is guaranteed payment because that person is either under the national health insurance or the private insurance, whatever they have. They have over there, people don't go into a facility without knowing how it's going to be paid for. Right? And that's why we have to move to the stage where people feel comfortable, going to facilities. Colombia has attracted thousands of people outside of Colombia. In fact, medical tourism is big over there because they have upgraded the facilities to a level where persons are living in the United States and flying into Colombia to get treated because of the quality that's available. So our move to NHI is also going to open us up. We're going to be the only country in the Caribbean, this part of the Caribbean. Bahamas don't consider themselves part of the Caribbean, so I'm not going to count them. They are part, but they think they're Americans. I didn't say that, right? Well, we're going to be the only country in this part of the world who would have that program. Our facilities will be so upgraded that somebody from Barbados may just jump the plane and come because of the facilities.
Yeah.
There are investors who would say, look, I'm going to put a clinic, I'm going to have this facility because I know.
Yeah.
And I was saying to a colleague, in negotiating with these providers, because we talk about it $1,500 and $1,200 for CT scan, etc. The reason why the cost is that high is because the number of persons accessing the care is limited.
It's limited. That's
But
true.
if you're exposed to 100,000 people,
Yeah.
if $1,200 would not, I mean, there's no way you're going to charge to charge $1,200 because,
Yeah.
in fact, you may find that your facility, which had a lot of gaps during the day, is now
filled.
swamped.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, the spin-offs for NHI is so big. I mean, that overall, providers will be satisfied, patients will be satisfied, right? So we would not have big issues. And the hospital, I hope the gentleman is still listening. The hospital is going to come.
It will.
It may not come from government,
Yeah.
but it's going to come because investors would see that I have a guaranteed market.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I mean, I like the way this conversation is going. Of course, it's not, we haven't covered everything we expected to cover today, but I like, because it's important for us to understand that a lot of us that are talking about national health insurance, those of us that have voices, I should say, and are using those voices, whether it's to say no or to say yes, we have to understand that government doesn't only have an obligation to those who access the healthcare service as it is right now. But they also have an obligation to the people who need to access the service but cannot, even in its current construct. And we have to come to that realization that there are people in Grenada who cannot even afford to access the basic primary healthcare. You know, and it's as you said, you have health insurance, but your health insurance only covers you up to 65? And then after that, you have to depend on if you have a little money put away or the fact that the government or the primary healthcare that we have now is able to meet your needs and your requirements. So we have to be careful as a people when we speak about things, especially on public forums, that we don't sound too one-sided in the sense that we don't understand that in Grenada we have people who are voiceless.
Right.
Who cannot speak for themselves, who can't call in on a radio program and make pronouncements, who can't go on public forums, who can't do these things. And it's the government's obligation to see after these people, to look after these people, to look out for their best interest, and of course the best interest of their children, because if they don't have, by extension, their children don't have either, you know. So we have to be mindful of all of that. So national health insurance is basically a way of saying every Grenadian, regardless of who you are, what condition, what circumstance you are in, we have you covered.
Exactly. You know, and for the persons who probably are listening and saying, I have my private health insurance, what will happen?
Right.
Private health insurance would not be adversely affected by national health insurance. As somebody who practiced insurance, I managed a life insurance company for a number of years, and we offered health insurance. I remember when we had the first round of consultation, the question was asked. We met with the private insurance companies, and the question was asked, what's going to happen to us when NHI comes on stream? So the private insurers asking the question, and the private insurers asking the same question. What's going to happen to my plan? Now, in insurance terms, health insurance terms, there is what is called major medical interventions, and another called medical assistance. The medical assistance really is your day-to-day doctor's visits. So you go to see a doctor. So if I have a private insurance, it may have both major medical and medical assistance.
Right.
So my medical assistant is supposed to take care of my doctor's visits, my prescription drugs, those things. Major medical is supposed to take for surgical operations. Now, NHI would basically take care of your medical assistance program.
Right.
Doctor's visits, prescriptions. So that will be covered.
Right.
A private insurer, and I said to the group when we met, those of you who are forward thinking would start rebranding your product, because there are still people who would want the choice.
Yeah.
Because what NHI is going to do is provide what is called a provider network. So
Right.
these are the persons who are signed up. These are the persons who you have to go to.
Right.
An individual may decide, I don't want to go to Dr. X or Dr. Y. I have my private doctor who may not be part of the NHI network.
Of course.
His private insurance would give him access to that person, right? So you don't have to drop your private insurance. You can still have it. In addition to that, as far as overseas care is concerned, now there's still a lot of discussion about that. If someone has a major medical issue and they have to travel overseas, the choices generally are United States, Canada, UK. The bill from those countries are extremely high. NHI might say, look, we are going to look to providers who can provide the same quality of care, but at a much reduced cost.
Yeah.
So, for example, and I don't want anybody to say that I'm saying that's what's going to happen, I'm just giving an example. Someone has to do a major coronary bypass.
Right.
And the bill from, let's say, Jackson Memorial is $250,000 US. I'm just calling figures. But there's a healthcare facility in Colombia, for example, that can do it for $75,000. The same care, the same procedure, but at a fraction of the cost.
Right.
NHI may decide, look, we are going to network with those providers. So if you hold an NHI card and you have a heart operation to do, we're going to send you to Colombia. The individual might decide, I don't want to go to Colombia. I want to go to the United States. He can use his private health insurance to go there.
Right.
So the point I'm making is that your private health insurance can work as a complementary
To NHI.
Product to NHI. So you have the choice.
Right.
If NHI says that's the provider you have to go to,
right,
you can decide I'm not going to go there. But what's significant is that, and consumers should be aware of this, if I'm currently paying $150 per month for my private insurance, and my insurer is saying to me, your premiums won't change. Now, I'm going to the doctors that I would have gone to whether or not there was NHI. But because I now hold an NHI card, that's the card I'm giving the doctor. So that bill doesn't reach the insurance company.
right,
NHI pays.
right,
Now, consumers have to be aware that if you're paying the same premium for less service, because you're not claiming on that private insurance, then something is wrong.
Right.
What I said to private insurers, you need to adjust your premiums to recognize that the medical assistance part is covered by NHI.
right,
So concentrate on specialist visits, medical, major medical, those kind of things that NHI covers, but with restrictions as to
Right.
where you need to go.
of course.
And pitch your product that way.
Yeah.
And to me, everybody wins. Because I have my card, I can decide to go to the United States, I go to the United States. Or I decide, look, I'm going to go where NHI sends me. So people don't have to drop, in essence what I'm saying, people don't have to drop their private insurance.
Yeah.
What they have to be wary about is paying the same amount of money
Yeah.
to that private insurer for less coverage. Right?
And then that's when it becomes stressful because people are gonna start saying, "Well, I'm
Well,
paying
twice.
one and I'm paying two,"
So,
right?
I mean, that's why the conversation with private
Yeah.
insurers is that, look, you need to readjust your product to recognize that certain things are covered by NHI, others are covered, but it has restrictions as to where you can go to the care you can access, but you want to give somebody the wide open choice. And I also want to speak to those persons who say that I don't need NHI. If I fall sick, I'll jump a plane and I'll go. Guess what? It's 11 o'clock in the night and you fall sick. Now, you may have a facility in the United States or Miami that you can go to. When are you going to get there? The critical thing in healthcare is the immediate intervention.
Yeah, the now aspect.
So, you still need to use the facilities on island.
You do.
You still need to use it. Now, if you don't sign up for NHI, and that's what people have to understand, if you don't have an NHI card and you go to the hospital, you'll be billed.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. What a card does, it gives you access to care. But if you don't have a card, you're not
billed.
part of the NHI, you're going to be billed.
But we also have to take into consideration that life is unpredictable. Anything can happen at any time.
Anytime.
You're driving down the road, you meet in an accident, whether it's a major, minor accident, you have to, at some point, receive medical assistance.
Immediate.
You're going down the stairs, you fall and you break your foot. You can't jump a plane for that go to the
But
U.S.
Ms. Duncan, you'll be surprised. There are people who say, I'm not interested in NHI because I can pay for my medical. I had a conversation with this, he was the chief medical officer in Trinidad. And he gave us a story that his brother, who was fairly well-to-do, had...
Let me just stick a pin. We have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller.
Good morning. Good morning to your guests.
Good morning. Good morning.
I think I recognize the voice.
Good morning.
I just want to make a couple of comments, not to ask a question in respect to the NHI and the whole question of the provision of health care. The first statement I want to make, and I guess callers would know this is Senator Humphrey here. The first statement I wish to make is that there is no free health care anywhere in the world. Whether that health care is provided to you in the United Kingdom, where there is a fair degree of state-assisted access to health care, whether it's in the United States, where the dominant feature of health care is through private insurance, whether it's in the socialist state of Cuba, where the state takes on the full responsibility of providing that, there is no free health care any part of the globe occupied by human beings. You will get access to health care without charge, and that's a difference. It's a difference between without charge and free.
Yeah.
Because free implies that nobody pays for it. Now, in socialist countries as in Cuba, the state carries that charge. So you get it free, but the state must pay for it. We are facing, in the post-colonial period, in all of our countries in the Caribbean, whether it's Trinidad with a lot of oil money, or whether it's Guyana now that's just about to become rich with oil, we are facing a health crisis throughout the region. This is just not unique to Grenada. You go to St. Vincent, it's the same cry. You go to Antigua, it's the same cry. You go to Jamaica, it's the same cry. Simply because the provision of health care is a very costly business. It is costly simply because medicine has graduated into a highly technological matter that requires no longer feel and touch medicine, but requires diagnostics. And requires scientific intervention that is exceedingly costly. So this is not the age of 1920 medicine. So let's begin with that. First of all, people have to understand that you will have to pay. The state will assist by making it, and the state is already assisting, because we have a no payment charge for an individual which visits any of the state institutions, be it a medical center in the community or you go to the hospital where there's some minimal charges to be paid. But we have to get out of this idea that the provision of medical services is free. The best that you can achieve is you can get it at a subsidized rate. And this is what NHI achieves to do. NHI attempts to do two things. One, it attempts to raise the quality of healthcare and it will do so by pooling resources that can then be invested in the healthcare delivery system. Right now, it is a consolidated fund that finances healthcare, and all over the Caribbean, indeed, all over the world with a British socialized medicine tradition, it's in deep crisis. Those funds are no longer sufficient. There's a lack of sufficiency of funds to be able to provide you healthcare standards to the 21st century standard that people now expect and people now require. Secondly, by pooling resources, you will reduce individual cost. And by reducing individual costs, you will therefore reduce individual charge. So let's be clear on those three distinctions.
Right.
And this is why it is absolutely necessary for us to move to instituting national health insurance. Because national social security, old age security as we have it here, that system requires a pooling of resources. It is not an elective. You can't decide, well, I could afford it, so I'm not in. I am out. No, the system cannot operate like that. For it to be affordable, for you to receive it at a charge that is within your reach, then it must all be pooled. And that is what NHI does. It pools all the resources. Everyone makes a contribution. No. For those who physically or otherwise incapable of making a contribution, the pool will take care of them. So, for example, an infant just born that will have medical difficulties, that infant will be able to access quality health care paid for from the pool, right? Until that infant reaches of age where that infant will now compulsorily have to pay by a deduction put to the system. So I just thought that I would clarify that issue because I know there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
I know there's a lack of understanding. I know there are people who have mischievous intent and will do everything to undermine what otherwise is a very, very good program meant to address the deficiencies in the current system, right? Meant to provide health care to people who desperately need it and who otherwise will not have access to adequate health care unless we institute this system of national health insurance. I just want to thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator Humphrey. It's always a pleasure hearing from you. And this is what we aspire here to do at Hard Talk. We aspire to ensure that the information reaches the people wherever you are, in whatever strata. And the conversation will continue with me and Stan and you, of course, as it relates to national health insurance, because there are so many aspects of national health insurance that is meant to be discussed, but for now we are out of time. Do you have any closing words that you would like to say?
Yeah, I just want to thank Senator Humphrey for his intervention. I mean, I did see that he has been involved in this for a while. In fact, he is the chairman of the National Health Insurance Advisory Committee. So we worked closely together, and his interventions are always welcome. And to the listening public, as Ms. Duncan said, we would want to continue the conversation because the more informed we are, is the better we are to respond to the naysayers, because NHI is intended to benefit the state.
Absolutely.
The state meaning every individual, your brother, your sister, your cousin, everybody.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I use this phrase, a healthy nation is always a wealthy nation.
All right. Now, I know that we said we were closing, but let's take this very last caller who wants to slip in at the last moment. Good morning, caller.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Yes. You're talking the NIS today, yeah?
NHI.
No, NHI. But we are... We caller, before you begin, let me just let you know that we are way out of time. So can you keep your question very direct and brief?
I will, Mom, I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, I heard a caller, I think it's the president of the Senate, mention about the cost. Health would never be free. No one, in this life, we know that everything is paid for. Nothing is free. In other words, they will tell you that they're giving you something free, but at the end of the day, someone else have to pay for it.
Absolutely.
So, what I think the caller was trying to explain, we know that nothing goes free. But there should be certain measures, policy put in place to make healthcare more accessible for the less fortunate, the poor people.
Right.
And he also mentioned about I think he played the blame game here. He was trying to say that all over the world.
I'm sorry, caller, do you have a direct question? Because we really are out of time.
I want to comment on what he said.
Well, okay, tomorrow we are still continuing the conversation for NHI. So I would advise that you try, because we are really out of time for comments.
Yeah, okay. Because
all right, I'm sorry.
Their brain are bigger than people own, you know? That's why I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
All right. I think the senator was quite clear in what he was saying. It's not really blaming anybody at all, but explaining that and stating facts that nothing is free. There's always somebody in the back end somewhere paying for what you perceive to be free. And I think that's the point that he was making, and he's absolutely correct. That is generally how it is. But people, we really are very much out of time, but we will continue this conversation tomorrow. Stan, I hope to have you here. And to those of you listening, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tune in, because we're talking about something of national importance, giving information that will be useful in the decision-making process as it relates to the national health insurance. So guys, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. So in whatever you say and whatever you do, be safe and secure. We want to be speaking with you and not about you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
The strength of the iron, it's in the testing. It's not a loss.
Financial support and more scholarship opportunities for Grenada from the Kingdom of Morocco. Details to this story and more in the National Report. With the details to the news for Tuesday, November 5th, I am Leslie Ann Johnson. Enhanced diplomatic relations between the Kingdom of Morocco and Grenada are resulting in more educational opportunities for Grenadian students to study at universities in Morocco. During Tuesday's post-cabinet briefing, Foreign Affairs Minister the Honorable Peter David said Grenada was awarded 32 scholarships from the Kingdom of Morocco. 20 of them are university-level scholarships, 2 for American universities in Morocco, and 10 for vocational training. Minister David recently returned from what he has dubbed a fruitful and beneficial visit to Morocco, where he signed the agreement termed the Roadmap of Cooperation Program 2019 to 2021. The cooperation covers educational, technical cooperation, agriculture, financial assistance, and others.
For Morocco, we have an agreement for 20 scholarships. In addition to that, 2 scholarships are going to be provided for a university, what's called an American university in Morocco, where 2 students, 2 what they call excellent students, will attend and be given classes in English. The 20 scholarships that I referred to a minute ago are going to be given in French, so you have the first year learning the language, French language. For these 2 scholarships to an American university in Morocco, it will be taught in English. In addition to university-level courses, we are going to have 10 young people are sent to Morocco to learn to vocational training institutes. The details of which vocations they learn, which skills they learn will be worked out with Morocco. So we have an additional 10. So in all we have 32 scholarships to the Kingdom of Morocco, and we are very grateful to the Kingdom for these scholarships.
Minister David says these scholarships should be administered during the September 2020 school term once all the requisite documents and structures are in place. He encourages students not to look at the distance or language barrier as a deterring factor from applying for the scholarships. The Roadmap of Cooperation Program 2019 to 2021 also includes financial support to the government of Grenada for the next 3 years, totaling $1 million EC per year.
Financial assistance in the amount of $500,000 a year over the next 3 years will be granted to the Ministry of Finance. That's over $1 million EC granted every year for the next 3 years from the Kingdom of Morocco to Grenada. Financial support. The Ministry of Finance will determine its use, and that is not going to be tied to any particular project. It's just financial support to Grenada, budgetary support, I think it's called, for the government of Grenada.
Grenadians will soon benefit from upcoming diaspora engagements as government seeks to organize and strategize its engagement in diaspora affairs. On Tuesday, Minister for Foreign Affairs Peter David disclosed that government is collaborating with the International Organization for Migration, IOM, to foster a transfer of the diaspora's human, social and economic capital, as well as to enhance exchanges and strengthen partnerships.
The diaspora must be made aware of the availability of investment opportunities. And that is not sufficiently being done. That is why there's this view that investments are only there for foreigners. It's absolutely untrue. Any person from the diaspora, and we've had it. I've had many persons in the diaspora come to Grenada and say, listen, we want to invest in this, that, or the other. We must find a smoother mechanism to ensure that is done. But that is why we're engaging in this project.
The project will focus on a diaspora mapping exercise which highlights skills within the diaspora and facilitate a match in Grenada. Project coordinator Mrs. Tricia Mitchell-Darius explained that the mapping exercise will assist in the establishment of a database that can be accessed when there is an availability both in Grenada and the diaspora.
I would like to direct you to the survey that is on there, which is our online data tool, which will feed into a database, a skills database that the government of Grenada will be able to access so that we're able to connect with the diaspora for any opportunities that may arise.
She highlighted other key activities that will be held over a 12 to 18-month period and exactly how Grenada stands to benefit.
We have remittances for development. As I mentioned earlier, Grenadians contribute significantly to the development of Grenada through our remittances. The project aims to discuss ways in which the cost of sending these remittances for people in the diaspora can be reduced and how these remittances can be structured for national development. Re-establishing the Office of Diaspora Affairs. The aim is to create an institutional mechanism in Grenada to advise and implement government's policy with respect to the diaspora and to ensure that a system is put in place to ensure accountability and transparency in operations in order to accomplish the goals and vision and to coordinate the work of diaspora organizations while strengthening linkages with the Grenadian diaspora.
The International Organization for Migration recognizes the link between migration and economic, social, and cultural development, as well as the right to freedom of movement. This is the National Report. More news after the break.
Did you join the public service on or after February 22nd, 1985, and have since retired? This might be important to you. Government understands that the NIS pension may be insufficient to take care of your needs. So, while it awaits the court's ruling on the matter of pension for public officers, government has taken action to protect your quality of life so that you can take care of your needs in the meantime. Persons who joined the public service on or after February 22nd, 1985, and serve continuously in an established position for a minimum 26 years and 8 months, and retired at age 60, may be eligible to receive an advance payment, which when combined with NIS, represents 70% of their last salary. For more information, call or visit the Pension Secretariat in the Department of Public Administration, Ministerial Complex, 440-3767.
Continuing the news, the government of Grenada has signed a 9-month contract with Miami-based firm Joint Independent Provider Association to complete the process of development for implementation of the National Health Insurance Program. Grenada's Prime Minister, Dr. The Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, has hailed the historic agreement which took effect on October 29, 2019, as a game changer for the healthcare system, given the many challenges faced by the system throughout our history. With the new contract with the agency, Grenada is poised to become one of only a few developing nations around the world and in the Caribbean to introduce a sustainable brand of national health insurance to its citizens. The network, headed by Grenadian-born and USA-trained neurologist Dr. Kestened, promises that the NHI plan will overhaul the system and sustainably address issues of cost and delivery of healthcare in Grenada. The association promises to utilize its extensive experience in managing high cost to introduce a system of managed and value-based healthcare to Grenada, which will be available to all citizens. Health Minister the Honourable Nicholas Steele believes the government's contract with the association, which builds on work already started by the University of the West Indies and other stakeholders to eventually launch an NHI in Grenada, is a necessary step to overcoming many of the challenges that the healthcare sector now faces. Over the next 9 months, the association has pledged to continue extensive consultations and work with all sectors and stakeholders to develop and finalize the necessary benefit plans, funding models, and administrative processes for the implementation of the NHI. Finally, the plant quarantine unit in the Ministry of Agriculture wants to ensure that Grenada maintains its market share in the United States for soursop, and to do so, it must take precautionary measures to prevent the importation of 2 insect pests into the country. Details in this report by Karima Lewis, the Ministry's Public Relations Officer.
Building capacity for monitoring and surveillance for 2 insect pests of quarantine importance with specific focus on soursop. This is what pest management officers and other technical officers of the Ministry of Agriculture and Lands are currently being educated on as they engage in a 4-day workshop at the National Stadium. The session is aimed at encouraging monitoring and surveillance for 2 pests, a known as seed wasp and the soursop fruit moth, that, if they enter Grenada, can affect soursop and ultimately impact access to the U.S. market. The workshop, which began on Monday, is part of a larger food and agriculture organization project aimed at improving the value chain of soursop in Grenada. Facilitator, plant health specialist for the Caribbean Agriculture Health and Food Safety Agency, CAFSA, Juliet Goldsmith, talks about why this workshop is so important to the soursop market.
Grenada currently is the only country within the Carriacou region that is authorized to export fresh soursop to the U.S., and so we want to maintain that market. Part of that process is to make sure that those organisms, which are not only important to Grenada, but they're important to the U.S., and it is based on the absence of those 2 organisms from Grenada that they're allowed to export fresh soursop. So it is about making sure that Grenada knows how to identify how to detect those organisms were they to enter, so has to maintain this market. Surveillance takes resources. It can be a complex process, but it is worth doing because surveillance supports food security. And without surveillance, you leave yourself vulnerable to invasive species, which will affect not only your market potential, but your own production within the country.
Pest Management Officer Thaddeus Peters explains how critical the workshop is to the work that is being done at the Pest Management Unit.
It's important that we focus on surveillance for those 2 pests and have more eyes out there in case there is any introduction or any incursion of those pests. So we're trying to empower some of the frontline officers as to what to look for in regards to the soursop, wasp, and fruit moth. It has been listed and reported in a number of Caribbean islands. As we say, Grenada is the only country that was cleared because we were able to do a survey to determine the absence of those pests about 20 years ago. But what we are doing now, following this workshop, we will have continuous surveillance in selected fields to ensure that those pests are not here.
Shawan Joseph, agricultural officer based at the Maribo Propagating Station, is optimistic about the outcome of the workshop.
We will be better capable of surveying for the pests, being able to monitor more efficiently, especially for soursop, which is one of our high-value crops. And with such a field like Maribo, which is a germplasm, where farmers come together planting materials, it is highly critical that we be very observant for any pests that comes into the island in general, but especially within our plots.
The 4-day session will culminate on Thursday. For the Ministry of Agriculture, I am Karima Lewis.
And that's the National Report. I'm Leslie Ann Johnson.
Now this is the big one as Culture Train String Band Group presents The Paran Train 2.0 from Friday, November 1st to Saturday, December 21st. And we kick things off on the Sister Isle. Friday, November 1st, the Brunswick Cemetery. November 9th, Bristol Shop in Leicester. November 15th, Modest Shop in Mount Royal. November 16th, Waynes Bar, Hillsborough. November 22nd, Brongoat Shop, Harvey Vale. November 23rd, Goosey Shop, Winwood. November 27th, Sky Shop in Brunswick. November 29th, we head to Union Island to Hugh Malzak Square, Clifton. November 30th, we inside P.T. Martinic at Jigs Cross. December 4th, Pro Shop, Belvedere. On December 6th, we head to the mainland Grenada at Travelers Bar, Grandmore. And on December 8th, Gold's Bar under the Bamboo, Pedmota. December 11th, Marvin Shop in 6 Roads. And on Saturday, December 21st, it's the grand finale round the island. And all events start from 7 p.m. Paran Train 2.0, brought to you by Grenada Tourism Authority, Government of Grenada, Grenada Distillers Limited, Digicel, WeiVybz FM, Sister Isle Radio, Amazing Colors, Ariza Credit Union, and Booms Construction.
The Paran Train, and they'll be coming in by you.
Stay up to date with all that's happening with the new National Party, NNP. Send us a message via text or WhatsApp on 405-8683 with your name, email, and constituency. Stay in the know with NNP. Get updated.